Hello and welcome back to another episode of How To, brought to you by Tim Unscripted. Today has been probably one of, I would say, the most challenging days in this whole How To series. What you're seeing on the screen is the result of an hours-long effort to, I don't want to say hack, but definitely working through the process of getting my Linux laptop remotely controlled for the purposes of recording videos by RustDesk, not Rusk, RustDesk. Lots of words. Anyway, so this is my Linux desktop. I will actually drop a picture of said desktop as I'm going through this whole configuration. But really, I want to explain why this video is being done the way it is. And it boils down to this. So as part of this how-to series and kind of moving away from the BMAT experiments, I decided that it might be a good idea to do some OpenClaw experiments. You know, BMAT experiments, OpenClaw experiments. What could possibly not work? Well, in this particular case, a lot could possibly not work. And so here today on this video, I'm going to explain what this entire Perplexity thread looks like in terms of this particular desktop being run remotely from my normal production workstation, so forth and so on. So let's start at the top. And, you know, this was one of those, what I thought was fairly straightforward things. And mind you, I have run RustDesk on this Linux laptop before. And so this really, it wasn't much of a change except for the fact that I went and originally started with System 76's Pop! OS version 22.04, which is an Ubuntu fork. And then when their new Cosmic operating system, still Pop! OS, but with a Cosmic desktop, which is actually, this is the funny thing. So Cosmic is built using Rust. Rust desktop is built using Rust. Programming language. This is the thing. So I knew when I was running it in the old environment, you know, prior to doing the operating system upgrade. And by the way, now it's Cosmic with Pop! OS 24.04. So little did I know, and you can see I'm scrolling over here on the right-hand side. Little did I know that I was going to end up basically having a situation where the RustDesk client would not work under the common desktop environment that is part of the new Cosmic desktop. So there are two main desktop environments in the Linux world, X11 and Wayland. Now, Wayland is the one that is becoming the de facto standard. Big backstory. I don't have the time to go into this. In fact, it's not even really relevant other than the fact that Wayland caused me challenges. And so I ended up ultimately, after a fair amount of troubleshooting, you can see, I mean, I'm going through this thread and ultimately it started, the funny thing is it started, oh, well, you want to run a Docker container to act as a server for RustDesk, because this is the other thing. If you've used RustDesk recently, their public server has been, they've been having some challenges. And so in order to get over a lack of connectivity that actually occurred as a result of trying to run through the public server, I was at that point where I went and I decided to go the gauntlet and install a private server. The private server ultimately was supposed to be running in Docker on the studio production desktop, which is a Windows 11 Pro desktop. And it's kind of my primary driver, or my daily driver, when it comes to any of the creative work that I'm doing, specifically on YouTube and recording these videos. So it was like, okay, my preference would definitely be to keep everything consolidated and under one roof. And it looked like it was working. And so I had Docker Desktop up and running, and I'm doing all the configs. And this is really where we went. Initially, Perplexity thought that I wanted to run the Docker server on the Linux laptop, which I didn't think was a good idea because I've got a lot more compute horsepower on the Windows box than what I do on the Linux laptop. Because the Windows box is a full-blown desktop. It's actually a Corsair gaming desktop that I don't game. I do media production, so good for gaming, good for media. You go figure. So lots and lots of troubleshooting and trying to figure out why this thing is not connecting. I mean, it's just it was crazy, folks. It was truly crazy because in spite of actually mapping everything correctly and getting the right keys in place and whatnot, I was still having problems on the Linux side of the equation getting RustDesk to connect. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm going, this shouldn't be that hard. You notice, I mean, I'm like literally moving my terminal window around just to show you that, this is actually working. In fact, we'll do an ls command / rust desk server. And I've got my compose YAML. Now, mind you, and a lot of this, of course, is running through my exchange with Perplexity. I'm quite, I'm doing the copy paste thing across two environments. First of all, it was a Windows environment to try and make that work. Then it was doing basically the same thing after a ton of troubleshooting in the Linux environment to try and make that work. And it finally got to this point where, I'll say easily, let's see, probably 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 4 to 5 hours, 4 to 5 hours worth of back and forth just to get to this point. And I haven't even launched OpenClaw yet on System 76. I have it installed, I have it configured, but I haven't been able to record any sort of interactions between OpenClaw on this machine and, of course, my mobile phone using Telegram as the way to communicate with the framework gateway, the OpenClaw gateway. That's right. So this is one of those where you're actually seeing the result of my Saturday morning going away. And I'm saying this because right now it's almost 1:30 on Saturday afternoon. But remember the point and purpose of all of these videos is to act as a catalyst, as inspiration for less technical people, or even just non-technical people who have a genuine curiosity to go and tinker themselves and figure out how to make things work. As my colleague Harold Polcher, and we were talking about this yesterday, he reminded me of something that is absolutely correct, regardless of the role. And I'm saying this specific to my profession. I am in software product development. This is what I do, but I am not what I look at it. I am one of the people who, if we were to look at Euler's circles, on the left-hand side, we have those people who are more business focused. And on the right-hand side, we have people who are more build focused. I am a left-hand side person. I am a business focused person. I'm not necessarily a build focused person. Generative AI has enabled me to be more build focused than what I had been in years past. So that's a wonderful thing. I'm actually getting closer to the builders because I'm able to work out of the same tools that they're working out of and getting things done. It's really been a tremendous bridge and a huge asset to being more productive and actually having more empathy for the testers and for the guys who are actually writing the code. I shouldn't say guys, but people who are writing code. So this has been in all of these videos and what you've seen so far. All of this has been me as a software product development professional showing what the art of the possible is, even with a less technical background. And by less technical, for me, I'm going to freely admit that I've got a couple of college degrees that are technology based, but I was not ever on a software development track in school. It was not my thing. I'm a systems integrator by training, by education. I make Linux, talk to Windows. I do kind of and folks, software folks, if you're watching this video, don't get upset with me. I look at it at a software stack very different. I should say, I look at a system stack or an application stack very differently than most people, because for me, it starts with a concrete foundation, with cooling, with power distribution, with network connectivity, effectively from the data center on up, or like in my case with the home lab, from the hardware up through the operating system, through orchestration layers, applications like Docker and so forth. So I don't ever reside fully in just the software. I'm a software and hardware guy. My professional experience is all the way up and down, starting from systems administration and going through to today, where I'm actually, working with agents writing code. So this is an exploratory journey that's been going over many years, and I continue to develop skills. There are a lot of command line, things that I have forgotten over time. And this is the reason why I'm struggling with Linux and also struggling with, PowerShell, is because I don't need to know these commands anymore. Or I do, but I don't, I'm starting to get there with all the git commands, pulls and, git pull dash rebase and, git push and, so it's slowly but surely coming back to me in a lot of ways, but it's difficult. It's challenging. And I'm saying this as a guy who's been in this profession for pretty close to 30 years now. And I know I'm dating myself, and I'm stating my age clearly, as if you couldn't tell because of the gray in my beard and the fact that, I've lost most of the hair on the top of my head. Suffices to say, I've been around the block. I've seen a lot of things. And this is me diving into a space that really is I'm going to have to dig into this in a separate video. Really, this is the life lessons learned part of it. So I'm not going to give that away, but from the how-to, learning and relearning some things that I've had experience with in the past, and I'm coming back. And, this is just one of those things. And so the investment of 4 or 5 hours to get something like a remote desktop access client working is good for me professionally. In addition to, it's good because if I can do this, anyone can do this. And I say that because tools like Perplexity and, ChatGTP and Copilot and, Claude, in so many ways, they can accelerate your troubleshooting. They can help you get over some of the initial hurdles and humps to get your stack, whatever that looks like, operating system applications, integration layers, all of this going, but you have to be willing to try. You have to be willing to experiment. And so, not exactly what I had in mind to work through on a Saturday morning. I'll tell you, you can see there's just a ton of troubleshooting steps walked in here. I mean, it was a very lengthy and, by the way, for me, tedious process to get to this state. And I'm showing you this because this is like the RustDesk deal, So we can come over here. We can go I don't think it's actually showing anything. Anyway, trying to toggle and show you a little bit of activity. Well, and here's another thing, so one of the Rust Desk. So I actually have 2 instances of RustDesk installed. I've got the download directly from the website, in addition to, I want to say, a Flatpak, or kind of like I'm trying to think of, in the Linux world, they're basically stores where you can download trusted software applications. So I've got 2 of these things configured. And of course, one of them's configured one way, one of them's configured another way. Believe me, I've got to figure out a way to make RustDesk work holistically, because I've got my daily driver for work, which is a Windows laptop. I do some recording off of that. I've also got a Mac Studio, which is more for AI, heavy AI workloads, because it is one of those Mac Studios. And so I have a fairly well integrated home lab that I do both, legitimate things in. That didn't come out right. Anyway, I do things that are oriented for work, in addition to oriented for learning and sharing on social media. So this is one of these where, these are actually custom desktop icons that I created using Perplexity, because I was having some problems with my shutdown sequence and actually getting the laptop to hibernate. Heck, I may not change back to Cosmic if, this actually works better as far as controlling certain aspects of Linux. I know it sounds like I'm rambling, and I apologize for that, because I don't ever want to misinvest your time. But, this is tech. This is tech today. And we do a fairly good job of abstracting friction away in software development to the best of our ability. But sometimes, just sometimes, it's not a bad thing to experience the friction and the discomfort of not having things work right out of the box. So for me, well, I will definitely get to the point where I'll be able to demo OpenClaw at work here. And by the way, there's a lot more that I've got to do in order to prep OpenClaw properly, especially if I want it to work with local models, in addition to not being able to make too many decisions on its own that might jeopardize a repo if I wanted it to go in and refactor a repo. I'm thinking through a number of different things long before I ever actually deploy OpenClaw to start work. And this is me. It would be negligent of me to just YOLO OpenClaw, because I know better. And part of this video series on these OpenClaw experiments is going to be me showing you, oh, by the way, and I'm going to give you a preview of coming attractions here. When I do the OpenClaw thing, you best believe that I am going to give it an entirely different set of permissions and a dedicated account in GitHub, so that it does not refactor a repo without permission. I will also create different accounts for it to do things for me on Google. I will also be putting it to work on finding, duplicate photos of all of my photos from when our kids were, littles to where they are nominally as young adults. There's a ton of things, though, that have to be in place in order for me to feel comfortable letting OpenClaw go do work. I don't know how you feel about this, and maybe this will be the most controversial part of this whole experiment. It's not that I don't trust OpenClaw. I recognize that as a gateway, and at least at its current state, it can do more harm than good if I, as the human in the loop, do not put safeguards in place to prevent it from doing more harm than good. Similar to BMAD, which definitely was much less invasive, files that drop right into your repo, agentic personas that you can invoke in your favorite AI-enabled IDE chat. OpenClaw is an entirely different animal, and you can go and watch other YouTube channels from the standpoint of seeing whoever run OpenClaw. My goal is not that. My goal is to show you, oh, by the way, these are kind of the painful steps that I'm going through in order to make it work. And maybe it isn't the right investment of your time. Maybe OpenClaw is one of those things where you just go, no, Hermes is better. Now, by the way, I know nothing about Hermes. Hermes is now a discussion point in some of our internal chat threads at work. I'll probably figure out how to make that work too. But at some point in time, with all these tools, we as the people operating, supervising, orchestrating, however you're working with these tools, you need to understand what the upside and the downside are. And you need to take appropriate steps in order to avoid or mitigate or minimize your downside for using these types of tools. And so while, again, I didn't expect to be investing 4 to 5 hours of my Saturday morning just getting my Linux laptop up and running to be able to run OpenClaw safely in an environment where I've got a high degree of control, it is time well invested for me, which is also the reason why I didn't take time to record this whole ordeal, because you would have been bored as I'm struggling through all these different threads on Perplexity over here to get this thing up and running. Hope that at the end of this, you don't feel discouraged, because my journey is not your journey. And I don't do things the easy way, especially when it comes to tech. I tend to do things a little bit on the little bit more difficult side, to say the least. So for you, maybe you do choose a different OpenClaw route, which is perfectly acceptable and quite all right. Maybe you have a dedicated piece of hardware as well, but it's in the shape and function of, a mini PC with Windows Home or Windows Pro running on it. Most people are running version 11. There are some version 10 folks out there. I don't know if OpenClaw is supported on version 10, but not my concern, not what I'm worried about. So to summarize everything and kind of to wrap up this particular recording, what you're seeing over here is a multi-hour long effort to get RustDesk, which here's a little RustDesk indicator here, up and running as a local server, a private server, between my Windows 11 Pro studio environment and my Linux System 76 laptop environment. And what I had originally planned on doing was using the Windows box as the server for RustDesk. And it turned out that it ended up being the Linux laptop as the server for RustDesk due to a bunch of troubleshooting and network things going on. So, in fact, just so that everybody can see that this is like legitimate, I am going to bring my System 76 laptop up over here. Hey, come on. And yes, it is live. So you can see the desktop on video. Oh, crap. Well, there goes my robotic camera. Hello, Mr. Robot. Yeah, this is great. By the way, me in tech. This is Tim Unscripted on tech. So suffices to say, what I'm doing and what I'm showing is legitimately the things with the hardware, with the software, with all the deal that is brought to you from my home office and my home lab, doing stuff to encourage and inspire you to pursue your own experiments and to hopefully get your hands into some stuff like, your terminal, and challenge you to think and use tools like Perplexity as your thinking platform for learning how to make stuff work. I'm perfectly content to show you all of this, but if at the end of all of these videos, you're not taking steps yourself to do some of this work, then while I appreciate the fact that you're watching, could you be doing more? And that, I guess, is going to be my challenge to you. Understanding that, I've been working at this for a bit should not discourage you, because you're probably not going to do the same OpenClaw implementation that I'm doing. I'm doing it in the most, challenging way, because what my intent is to be able to record what's going on a separate piece of hardware, remotely to my studio, so that it's a more educational and inclusive experience where this is self-contained and by and large isolated from, that doing damage or, getting access to things that I don't want OpenClaw to be able to play with. This is me putting it in its own sandbox, and ultimately it's going to do what it's going to do and hopefully have some fun while it's doing it and make me go, wow, I didn't expect that was going to happen. So, but yep, all that prep to bring you a video where basically I figured out that running a RustDesk server for local connections is not nearly as straightforward or as easy as it might seem on the face of it. And if you've held on thus far to this entire video, congratulations. We are basically closing this one out. And I will say this, thank you for watching all the way to the end. And this concludes another how-to video brought to you by Tim Unscripted.